Hi, welcome back. Now that we've taken a look at some of the more basic ideas of composition in the quick fixes section, we're going to explore some of the more advanced concepts, starting with the golden mean, or ratio, and the rule of thirds. Now, these are arguably the most important elements in composition in that they provide the overall framework for an image. They create balance, and they allow for other compositional elements to work within the frame. So they're a great place to start when you're first composing your shot. Let's start with the golden mean. The golden mean is a ratio of 1 to 1.618. Now don't get too worked up about the math here, it's not too important. But the concept is, this ratio, for some reason, seems to occur everywhere in nature, in the formation of trees and forests to even the formation of galaxies. I've even heard that it's used in complex economic equations and possibly even in your DNA. For whatever the reason, our brains seem hardwired to recognize this ratio and quite like it, so it's an important element. Let's take a closer look. A line divided by the golden mean looks like this. The longer section, AB, divided by the smaller section, BC, is equal to 1.618. Also, the length of the entire line, AC, divided by the larger section, AB, is 1.618. So, don't worry about the math here. It's really not that important, but the concept is very interesting. So, to expand on this line, here's what a rectangle in the golden ratio proportion would look like. So, how do you apply this? In visual art, this is applied by subdividing your image by the ratio. The resulting image can look like this. Notice that even without any subject matter, the image clearly focuses the eye to the lower right section, creating a point of interest. You would, in this instance, place important subject matter around that area. Balance comes into play here too. The larger number of smaller rectangles on the right balances out the overall larger yet empty left side of the picture. Arranging your composition around these lines will help to give your picture better balance. And while this works great for painting and drawing, it's somewhat complicated and hard to envision through the viewfinder of your camera while you're trying to compose your shot and deal with whatever other distractions you may face in the field. That's where the rule of thirds comes in. The rule of thirds is basically a simplification of the golden mean. And while it doesn't correspond exactly mathematically with the golden mean, its proper implementation will give you the same effect. And it's much easier to envision and implement than the golden ratio is. So, here's how it works. Divide your image into 9 equal parts, 3 vertically and 3 horizontally, essentially an X and O board. Using these lines as guides, place objects of interest at the intersections of the lines. This keeps the eye within the picture. Notice how these locations more or less align with the point of interest of the golden ratio example. You'll often hear photographers talk about weight or balance in an image. This is much easier to see with these lines in place. If you place elements of your photo 2/3 to the right or 2/3 to the left, it again generally becomes more pleasing to the eye. Vertically, try placing your horizon 2/3 of the way up or 2/3 of the way down. So let's take a look at a few photos now to get a feel for how you apply the rule of thirds. In this photo, notice how the tree in the foreground occupies the left third of the photo, while the barn in the background occupies the top and right 2/3. This is Ben. I just love this guy. But notice how the stick in Ben's mouth rests roughly along the top horizontal third line, while Ben himself occupies about 2/3 to the left of the photo. This photo of a security booth in Vancouver shows how you can apply the rule of thirds, but be kind of loose with it. Notice how the fence takes up the lower 2/3 of the photo, but the signs rest roughly in the outer third sections of the image. The booth itself is centered, which is not always desirable, but in this case kind of anchors everything else and provides a certain symmetry. Also taken in Vancouver, the skyline of the city occupies the top third of this photo, while the foreground occupies the lower 2/3. The condo complex is also divided 2/3 to the right and 1/3 to the left by the placement of the corner of the condo complex. This photo is a good example of breaking the rule of thirds. You rarely place your horizon right in the middle of a photo, but sometimes it works if you want to convey strong symmetry. In this case, I think it's more to do with the contrast of the fluffy clouds in the sky and the slight horizontal lines of the ocean in the foreground. In this photo, the ship and the horizon are roughly the top third of the photo, while the seagull and the posts occupy the lower right corner third of the photo. Another subtle element here is the sailboat up against the ship in the background. It sits nicely along the intersection point of the 2/3 lines. The rule of thirds is essentially very simple, but it can get a little complicated in its implementation, so don't overthink it. You'll often find that one element's in conflict with another. You'll just have to find a balance between the two or decide which one's most important and place the emphasis on that. But with practice, you'll find this becomes almost instinctive, and pretty soon you'll be taking much better photos.